The topic I was chosen to discuss today, and volunteered, I guess, is APRS and amateur radio. This is by far not a comprehensive dissertation or treatise of APRS, but it hopefully will give those of you who may be new to the technology just a little bit of a heads up into what it looks like and a little bit about how it works in the back end. This will be a fairly brief presentation. I don't have a great deal of time, but we're going to talk a little bit about the definitions, what the acronym stands for, or the letters in APRS stand for, the real version as to the what people think it stands for may be a little bit different, and a little bit about the underlying architecture and a couple of quick examples as to what it all looks like and how it works. Firstly, before I begin getting too deeply, I want to recognize the inventor of APRS, and that's Bob Bruninga. He was an instructor at the United States Naval Academy for decades, and as part of his instructing and electronic interest duties at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, he developed a system to track things. In this case, we started off with a Commodore computer and moved up to, or actually an Apple, then he moved up to an IBM and so forth. So we'll get there in a second. APRS stands for Automated Packet Reporting System. A lot of people erroneously believe it stands for Automatic Position Reporting System. It may have actually acquired that at some point in the deep past, but for the last 30 years or so, it's been the Automated Packet Reporting System. When he first started this, Mr. Bruninga was working, of course, with the Navy, and he used it to help track Navy ships on an Apple computer. And the original abbreviation, or the original letters to describe the technology, was the Connectionless Emergency Traffic System. Now, connectionless is actually an important part of how APRS actually works, so I'll come back to that in a bit. Then eventually he deployed it on a powerful Commodore VIC-20 computer. By the 1990s, computer technology was improving even further, so it was moving to more PC-based architecture. And of course, GPS technology became available and somewhat reliable for the general public. And the price has come down on GPSs ever since, of course. The Connectionless Emergency Traffic System became APRS as we know it today. About 20 years ago, a dedicated APRS frequency for each continent was chosen. In North America, that happens to be 144.39 megahertz. It's FM, and it is used around the continent, including, I think Mexico is included in that, but there are different frequencies for Europe, Asia, South America, and so forth. There is one other APRS frequency that is occasionally used for our area, and that is not necessarily in North America, but it's over North America. The International Space Station maintains an APRS service at 145.825 megahertz. As you can imagine, it's very sporadic, being that the station is not always in our sky, and the APRS packet is not always turned on either. So, also in the 2000s, it became possible to not only have packets going from station to station in the amateur realm, but also being what we call I-gated, or internet gatewayed, to the rest of the world. And to make this all work, Bob Bruninga did a great deal of research and work and cajoling and prodding and somewhat demanding that certain things needed to change in the routing system. And we'll talk about that here briefly. Finally, in the first decade, both Yaesu and Kenwood became manufacturers who would incorporate APRS into their regular retail market radios. So up to that point, a ham essentially had to construct something, which wasn't always hard to do, but it involved lots of wires and lots of fiddling. Whereas now with APRS implementation in regular radios from Yaesu and Kenwood, it's now much more easy to acquire for the masses. APRS is essentially packet radio. It uses the AX.25 protocol at 1200 baud. If that means something to you, then excellent. If it doesn't mean anything to you, then that's okay. You can still use APRS even if you don't understand those numbers. The common frequency has been mentioned, and the connectionless aspect of APRS is quite important because these packets, unlike most ham radio communications that are not really to be broadcast, other than CQ or QSTs. In the APRS world, almost everything is a broadcast. It's broadcasted to, hopefully, the nearby repeaters or digipeaters that can take the signal and then do something with it based on what's in the addressing of the packet. Also, a lot of people don't realize this, but APRS is actually a bidirectional mode. It's certainly not duplex or full duplex, but it does work both ways in single half duplex type messages back and forth. It's not quick, it's not overly easy, but it is possible, and it's underutilized, I would say. So an APRS packet, those of us who are somewhat familiar with it already, we probably treat it as a position reporting system, which is fine. It is used like that for quite a bit, but it does more than that. So it's not just the GPS data. It also can provide and contain other information. For instance, if you have an APRS-enabled weather station in your backyard, it can take the weather data and put it into a packet and fire that off over the APRS system to be read by other people. It can do environmental checks, power supply voltage, etc., of the station itself. Other sensors that you may want to attach to something can be transmitted, their data can be transmitted over APRS. And you can actually have text-type messages or email messages that go back and forth. The status of the sending station can also be included in the APRS packet. The main thing to realize about this, and this is how I started because most of this packet stuff still is fairly far over my head, you don't need to know all the nuts and bolts of how APRS works in order to make it work for you. You just need to know that there are guidelines online, and if you read the guidelines and understand them and use those guidelines, you'll be fine. It's that simple, whether you understand the root reasoning underneath the guidelines or not. Very, very quickly, we'll just show you what an APRS packet looks like. All network traffic, whether it's your LAN, Wi-Fi, or whatever, has data packets that don't look identical to this, but they all have similarities. So there's going to be an addressing area of the packet near the beginning. There's going to be controls and frame checks just to make sure that the packet was successfully received, that all the bits and bytes made it to the other end. And there's going to be a field where information is contained. In this case, there's up to 256 bytes of information that can be transmitted with the packet, in addition to all the addressing and routing information. So here's the attempt for the sound. This will just be very brief, and let's see if we can hear what a packet actually sounds like for those of you who may not have heard one before. Anyway, did you hear that come through the speakers well, or did it just come through my own microphone?
Sounded great.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, David. Okay, and on to now the other thing, how AX.25 Packet works. For Genie out there, like Murray, V1 Tango Echo, I think he was right there at Bob Bruninga's elbow when they invented Packet, if I recall correctly. I think Murray was right there at the birth. He was in the manger. He was one of the wise men when APRS got born. But anyway, so this won't be news to Murray, but it was news to me as I'm doing my research for this. A modem. We've all used modems for decades. Modem actually stands for modulating and demodulating of an audio signal and basically translating that back and forth into computer data. On the sending side, you have a computer, or in some cases just a radio with a computer base underneath of it, that creates data that needs to be sent. That data is then used or converted into a sound by the modem. The sound is then transported over the radio's outbound AF component, becomes RF, and off into the air it goes. The packet will be picked up by other stations like digipeaters, we'll get to that in a moment, and using the proper routing, hopefully, packets will eventually get to where they need to go because of the addressing information that each of them contains. On the receiving side, the station getting the packet intakes it as an AF sound once it's brought in over the RF system. The AF sound on FM is then turned back into computer data using the demodulating part, and the data then goes to the computer or the recipient. And the computer can do many things with that data depending on what kind of data it is. It can plunk a little picture of a car on a map. It can present a message on the screen of a recipient. or it can actually forward that data on to another computer somewhere else. Alrighty, now here's how they get around. This is the routing part of APRS. And this is something that I actually learned a lot from just in the last few weeks as I was settling in my mind how I might do this presentation. Like other portmanteau words we have in ham radio, like modem, there's one called the digipeater, and it's very basic. It stands for a digital repeater. Packets come in to a digipeater. It will not rebroadcast the packet as a normal repeater does, which is full duplex. In other words, there's a set of cans, there's a massive filter, 600 kilohertz separation, and both receive and transmit are happening at the same time on VY1PJ or SMT in a voice situation, whereas packet, it's a store and repeat or store and forward system. So the digipeater will take the packet in and immediately will take it out of the buffer and rebroadcast it if that's what the packet wants to do. Or the digipeater may be connected to the internet and flow the packet onto the internet through the APRS-IS gateway for others to see it online. Every station on the packet world, or particularly in the APRS world, more appropriately, has what's called an alias. And it's a little anathema to what we're taught about ham radio stations having to identify and having each individual call sign and so forth. But the only way this system actually works is through the alias world. An alias is a fake or a presumed identity that really isn't the same as the call sign. But everything works out in the end because everybody is still legal. When you send a packet out over the packet system or an APRS system, your call sign is embedded in that data, so you are identifying appropriately. So the alias, which I'll get to shortly, are the things that the digipeaters use to figure out what to do with the packet. What happens is, essentially, you've got hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of digipeaters all around North America that all have a short collection of the same call sign. Just think of the alias as a call sign. That's what helped me immensely when trying to understand the routing of packets. In the old days, you would put a gateway or a digipeater on the air, and you would call it relay. And any packet that came out into the air somewhere that you received as relay, you interpreted it as being addressed to you, and then you would accept that packet and try to follow the instructions in that packet. Well, you can just imagine what happens if I sent a packet out from here in Charlottetown, and I got picked up by the local APRS, the APRS digipeater, and then it relayed it out to all the APRS digipeaters it could see from the mountaintop, because we do have mountains in PEI. That's just a joke. And then those digipeaters all digipeated it, and then over and over again, over the course of probably half an hour, my packet would make it all the way to the West Coast, and would try to collide with every other packet of the millions of packets that are all traveling at the same time. So the word relay just didn't work for very long. The minute APRS became somewhat popular, Bob Bruninga stepped in and said, we can't use relay anymore, this is just getting crazy. So he went to a new system called WIDE, and that's the destination preferred address nowadays, is WIDE. You can also send a packet to a specific call sign, as is still done all the time in regular AX.25 145.01 type packet, but with the APRS, it's typically a broadcasted thing. So now a digipeater will be programmed with an alias that says wide. Now it'll be wide 1 or wide 2, typically. A digipeater that has the alias of wide 1 will recognize any packet that's out there that's addressed to wide 1. The digipeater will take that packet and do something with it. Another digipeater down the road might be addressed with wide 2, and it'll receive and handle all the packets that are addressed wide 2. There's such a thing as wide 3 and so forth, but typically in North America, wide 1 and wide 2 are the only ones that really are common in our world. So here's the differences between them all. If you just say wide, well, that doesn't really do much because wide is more of the root word, but it's a destination address that started not quite 20 years ago, and the whole idea was to get rid of the word relay, so they've done that. Now, if you had a packet that went out, that you configured your packet station to say wide 1-1, that means it'll be picked up by a fill-in digipeater. A fill-in digipeater is one that's just there to cover off for little valleys and dead spots in the local APRS coverage. So a wide 1-1 packet, if it's heard by a digipeater, it will be received. The digipeater will then change the address of that packet and retransmit it, but put an asterisk in the call, wide 1 asterisk. That tells all the other digipeaters out there that if you hear this packet with an asterisk on it, don't do anything with it. It's already been received and rebroadcast. So that essentially kills the packet after that first hop out. The packet doesn't go across the continent and crash into the west coast. This is Bob's ingenious way of subtracting every time it got repeated, subtracting a digit from it, and then eventually ending it with an asterisk so that the packet won't go any farther. In wide 2-1, all things that are wide 2 are basically a large digipeater that have a large coverage area. It's still only one hop, and the -1, on both of these, the wide 1-1 and the wide 2-1. The -1 means one hop. It'll go one hop and then it'll get snuffed. Wide 1 is a fill-in digi, wide 2 is a wide area digi, if that makes any sense. Now, in the case of a wide 2, 2 or 3 digipeaters that are wide 2 aliased may pick up the packet and they'll do what they do. But it still won't go very far because what will happen with the wide 2-1, it'll be relayed, but then it will get an asterisk appended on that, so it won't go any farther after that happens. So what does APRS routing look like in the real world? Well, here is just a little drive I took last week. I was going to do an errand, I think it was last Tuesday, up into Charlottetown from over where I live in Stratford. And you'll see that there's times along, and this came from the APRS system, for APRS.FI. It's a website that tracks APRS traffic. So you'll see that my call sign, VY2HF-9, transmitted at those times that you see on the far left-hand side of the screen on that date of June 7th. And in most cases, it went to VY2EKR or VY2TRO or VY2TPH. And my packet, you'll see in some cases it says wide 1, and in another couple of cases it says wide 1 asterisk, which means when it got to, for instance, VY2TPH, the asterisk was attached to say that, okay, I don't need to put this packet any further out. It's already out once I transmit it one time. My packet that I sent also had a wide 2-1 in it. And if you'll notice the 2 that got rebroadcast near the top there by VY2EKR, it said wide 2 asterisk, about halfway across the screen there. That means it got sent out from the large wide area digipeater and, as it turns out, made its way to VE1AIC-11, which is the internet gateway, and it landed on the internet, over to Finland, on the web, and boom, I have it back here. My packet includes, you'll see geographic coordinates, 4616.09 north, for instance, 06308.67 west, and also a message from me. The message says, if you want to talk to me, I'm on 146.52. Oh, my name is Brent, and the equipment I'm using today is a TNC3. So that's essentially a personal message or personal information I can put at the end of my packet. Now let's see what all these coordinates look like on a map. This was my trip. I left home. I'm that VY2HF-9 little car down in the lower right-hand corner. I drove all the way up to Princess Auto, which is near Canadian Tire. I did my Princess Auto thing. I bought 10 of those fiberglass poles for antennas. Of course, it has to be a ham radio trip, or this wouldn't be legal. And then back home. I didn't take the exact same route back home, but you'll see those lines and little dots. Each of those dots represents one of those pieces of data that I shot out when I was APRSing just a moment ago. So that's what the map looks like. Quickly, though, back to the list of packets. If you look about halfway down, you'll see one at 10:18:48, where I transmit VE1 or VY2HF-9, and it ended up at VE1BHS, way over in Nova Scotia near Truro. So in a couple of these packets, they actually didn't land at a nearby PEI digipeater. They made it all the way to Nova Scotia, and that's where it was picked up. Likely because I was in a bit of a dead spot in Charlottetown when this all happened. So that particular packet, it went all the way over to VE1BHS, and then way back over to VE1AIC-11, which is Ron McKay's digipeater at his home near Cornwall in Meadowbank. So there it is. The packet went even farther than it really needed to go, but it still went only one hop, because when VE1BHS took the packet, notice that it said, if you're able to follow along here, wide 1 asterisk, then it said wide 2-1. So wide 1 asterisk means it retransmitted the packet, and it's telling the next station along the line to not retransmit it again. In this case, it ended up with Ron, VE1AIC-11, and his machine automatically I-gated it to the internet and then did not rebroadcast it. So that's where the wide addressing comes from, wide 1-1, wide 2-1. And I know more about that now than I ever knew up until about a week ago. Alrighty, so what is an I-gate? I've talked about that a few times. Basically, it's an internet linkage that's connected to the APRS system. So the APRS can be a handheld, it can be a vehicle, it'll go to a 2-meter land-based transceiver somewhere, and then it's connected through maybe a Raspberry Pi, as the case is here, through to a network, and then onto the internet to the APRS network, which is a worldwide clearinghouse of APRS traffic. Now, why was I called VY2HF-9? Well, that's my SSID. An SSID is a secondary station identifier. You may have seen SSIDs when it comes to your local Wi-Fi hub in your home. You may choose an SSID for it that represents your own Wi-Fi area from your own network connection at home. And if you're anything like me and probably most hams, I would strongly guess that your Wi-Fi connection probably has something, a derivative of your call sign in it, because I know mine does, and I think that's pretty common for us hams. Alrighty, so let's just use some real live people here and what kind of SSID they would have. If you were Brent and you were operating a home station and home-based iGate, you would probably use his call sign -0. -0 means a home station. If you're Joe and you were running a digipeater, running a relay, fill-in, digi, or maybe it had a weather digipeater on there, you might be VE9CYR-1. Don Weeks, being honored by a digipeater, might have the call sign VE1 Whiskey Bravo for our favorite silent key, and my Elmer, Don. Gary Stone, VE1 BHD-3, that could be a digipeater as well. These dash numbers, these SSIDs, it's not law, but it's strongly recommended that you follow the convention for SSIDs. Murray would be -4, he's an HF to VHF gateway. Doug, V1 BMW-5, would be an iGate that's not based at someone's home. NA1SS-6 would be a satellite or other space vehicle. VY2HF-7 would be me with my handheld. I don't know if you're able to see me or just seeing my screen, but I have a Kenwood THD-74, so that's already connected or configured as VY2HF-7. Kent, VE9KAR-8, knowing how much he likes sailboats, he'd be a marine vessel. VE9RPF-9 would be a land mobile. V1BCQ, Ron in Doketown-11, he'd be an iGate as well, connected to the internet. V1SKY-11 is a balloon. That would be, that's pretty well restricted to balloons. You wouldn't want to use -11 if you weren't a balloon, typically. VE9XX-12, a campsite, someplace remote. Could also be used for laptops. -13 would be typically a weather station. -14 would be used by truckers, transport drivers. And VE1XH, in this case Greg, he's on HF, he'd be -15. That would be his SSID. So that's how we operate. In my case, I'm a land mobile in the example I showed you earlier. So I was VY2HF-9. Now, how do my beacons get out there from my car? Well, there's two ways to do it. I can set up my APRS configuration to beacon at a regular interval rate, in which case every minute, every 5 minutes, whatever I choose, a packet will get shot off. If I happen to be in a dead spot at that moment and the packet leaves and it doesn't get anywhere, that will be a missing packet that never gets seen by anybody, so I may vanish for 2 or 3 of those hops if I'm in a bad spot. What other moving vehicles like to do sometimes is have smart beaconing, where your APRS will keep checking where you are, and every time you change course or accelerate or decelerate by a certain amount, then it will fire off a beacon. So it leaves more of a cookie trail every time you change direction. You end up beaconing more often that way, but in a fairly sparsely populated area like Atlantic Canada, I don't think that would be discouraged overly. You can also set it to only beacon when you make more than a 60-degree turn or more than a 70-degree turn. You can set all of those configuration elements in your APRS setup. And messaging. I won't touch too much on this, but just to know that it's out there. APRS-IS stands for Internet Service. And you can actually take APRS messages both from you to the Internet or someone else on the Internet, even a SMS message, and they can send a message back to you. It's not super easy and super smooth to do it, but it is absolutely possible. And when the bad stuff happens and there's no other way to get a hold of somebody, that may be the best way. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to get handy, if you're an APRS user, at finding ways to get through the gateway to get back and forth to other APRS users. And quickly, just to get ready for the wrap-up here, some of the APRS-capable equipment that's out there, much of it's familiar to many of you. Some of you use it already. In the left-hand side there is my Kenwood THD74. In the center is the new one of the new Yaesu radios. I don't know if that's the 400 or the 300, but anyway, it does APRS, as well as System Fusion, of course. On the right-hand side, you'll see a Baofeng handheld connected to one of those little TNCs. In fact, I operate one in the car, and it works really, really well. You buy the little TNC if you can find one. It's called a Mobile Link D. I can give you more information later if you need it. It's a Mobile Link D, and it actually connects with Bluetooth to your cell phone and takes the GPS data from your cell phone over the Bluetooth link, and all of your config, which is an APRS Droid. It's an application that you can download and put on your phone. And the APRS Droid talks to the Bluetooth device. The Bluetooth device is a modem. It's plugged into the Baofeng, and it can send and receive packets from a handheld, which is very cool. At the bottom of the screen is a Kenwood TMD700. There are several versions of that now, but they all look roughly like that. It's a very high-end radio, unfortunately not being produced right now, but a brand new one just got installed in the International Space Station, and they use them up there to great effect. So if you can get your hands on a D700, it'd be good to have. They do all kinds of cool stuff. And you can just get beacons that aren't actually full-blown radios. They transmit only. They don't receive packets necessarily, but they can transmit. And that one in the middle is one that's a perfect example of that. That is a Bionics, B-Y-O-N-I-C-S, a Microtrack AIO, all in one. I have one exactly like this in my car as well. You see the guy holding it in his hand. It's a rectangular-shaped Pelican case. Inside are 8 AA batteries providing 12-volt supply. There's a GPS in there. There is a transmitter on, it's frequency agile, but it's usually set for 144.39. And you can see an SMA antenna screwed onto the top of it. That has everything you need. You can walk around with that in your hand, and you've got yourself an APRS beacon. You can't receive messages with it, but if you just want to tell people where you're at, it's a great thing. And the thing on the right is another one of those smaller ones. They're all over the place on Amazon and elsewhere. And this one, the one on the right actually and the one on the left, they each have little screens on them. So I presume there's little OLED screens, I guess they are. But you can actually read messages on them and maybe configure it on the screen. But you can see how small they are. That one on the right is just sitting next to a box of matches. So pretty tiny and quite effective. Here's a neat thing I had going for a while. Hard to do now because the GPS unit, which is a Nuvi 200 by Garmin, is long out of production. But that particular GPS was very interesting in that it had 2 USB connections on it, one for the regular power from your car, but the other one put data out through what they call the fleet management port, and then that could be sent into a radio with an RS-232 conversion on some radios to do that. And you could actually not only use the GPS to derive the radio's location for outgoing packets, but the GPS would also receive incoming packets and paste those packet identities and locations onto the map on the GPS. And I actually had that working in my setup several years ago, and it was really cool. It was excellent until the battery in the GPS eventually failed, and my GPS died on me. And I can probably still try to find another one on eBay somewhere, and I may do that, but I'm on to other things now, and there's way cooler ways of doing that. But that GPS combo was really cool. And that is a very quick, and I hope not too quick, run through. I tried to stay in my half-hour time limit there, but I want to thank you for your attention. You've been a nicely muted crowd, and I do stand ready for any questions if there are any. No guarantees that I can answer them, but we got Murray on the line here too, so I think I'm saved either way. So back over to you. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Brent?
Yes, I have a million questions. So Brent, thank you very much for giving that introduction. As you know, I'm just new here, and I think you understand that for my purposes, I'm trying to send balloons up, and that's why I got interested in this APRS and want to become a ham operator and use APRS for my balloon tracking. Mm-hmm. So I'm a complete newbie, and I don't know much, and I'm trying to understand. May I ask a few questions about this?
Certainly.
I'm doing my first balloon launch on the 1st of August, and I bought so the balloon's going to go up, and I'm hopefully going to be able to track it in some manner and locate it when it lands, hopefully not in a lake or some other bad place. So I bought a spot trace, which is a commercial system, which sort of does basic stuff, but it will. Here's where I technically don't understand what's going on. It's purported that it will only work up to 20,000 feet. But so the standard way to use APRS, as I understand it, is to have a little computer or Raspberry Pi or something which has a GPS unit, and then somehow, using that Bionics thing or making it yourself, you connect to the APRS network. So the part I don't understand is why the APRS system, which obviously provides a lot of very useful information, unlike the spot trace, will work to very high altitudes. That's something I don't understand. But my practical understanding for wanting to use APRS for these balloon launches is that I will be able to get lots of information from the ground level up to 100,000 feet or possibly more, whereas I couldn't do it with these commercial simple trackers. Mm-hmm. And I don't I'm not a ham operator, so all the stuff about your radios, your Kenwoods, and all of this stuff is all new to me, but I've got to understand all this.
Right on, and David.
The final gotcha thing is can anybody help me get started in this, and particularly if not for the 1st of August launch, subsequent launches, because I'm starting to study for to become an operator, but I'm so busy doing a whole bunch of other stuff, and there's no way I can do that exam before the 1st of August.
Sure thing, David. Excellent. Well, first off, we've corresponded a bit on email, so I'm somewhat aware of your situation, and congratulations to you for what you're doing and the interest that the community upriver there has shown in what you're doing. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And if we can get ham radio to be a part of that, that's better for everybody. The quick answer to your last question, even if you don't get your license by August 1st, and even if you do, I think one of the easiest options may be just to find someone on this club meeting tonight or somewhere nearby who would be willing to partner with you and fly their call sign in your balloon. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So that is less of an urgency thing. Now, as far as what you fly, I think I sent you a link to a particular, a couple of links actually to the sites that I think are quite reliable. And one of them in particular, I forget which one it is, but they make a high altitude version of an APRS tracking beacon. and it's the price between it and the regular one isn't a whole lot different, but I think the high altitude one's a little bit more expensive, but not by much. And it will work higher mainly because it has a different or more precise GPS antenna in it. That's really the difference between the ones that work above 20,000 and the ones that don't. It's more the GPS end of it and how accurate that GPS can be at higher altitudes.
Does that have to do with triangulation?
I think it probably does, because most GPSs are looking down on the Earth. You've got a lot of triangulation ability with the lateral movement along the surface of the Earth. But once you get high, now you're looking at other things, other angles from those GPS satellites. It may be harder for them to pick it up unless the GPS itself either has more satellites in its constellation to get better math done or whatever. I don't know all the math of it all, but I think that's the reason. Yeah, Dave, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, and I had another question. Can't remember. Sorry.
No, that's fine. If you think of it later, feel free just to throw me another email, and
I remember what it was.
Okay.
It was you pointed out the Bionics site, and but I had the impression that since I'm not a ham radio operator, I couldn't buy one of these devices. I got to have a call sign. That was my understanding.
Yeah.
So I want to buy one of these things, but I'm just like you were saying that hopefully somebody would help me and use their call sign. I guess the bottom line is if I want to proceed, I've got to work that out.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal with Bionics in particular. I've had very good interaction with the owner. Bion is his name. The guy's first name is BYON, Bion.
Oh.
And I think if he understood the story, or even if you had, like me or somebody, write an email to him on your behalf saying, look, David Hunter is going to be placing an order for one of your units, just so you know that even though he doesn't have a call sign, all that means is, all he really wants the call sign for is just to do you the courtesy of pre-programming it in the unit before he sends it to you. But the unit can be programmed after you get it. So the pre-programming part is something that we can handle later, or somebody can handle later. And I could email him, or someone else could email him and say, look, Bion, here's what we're doing. David Hunter is getting his ham license soon. But in the meantime, if he doesn't have it in time for his launch, one of us is going to sponsor the device. So please don't be worried about sending it to a non-ham. And I think that would be fine.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And he's out in Arizona, I think, and he's a really good guy. I sent him that yellow thing that I had that it had failed on me, and he fixed it and sent it back. He didn't even charge me anything, and I was prepared to pay whatever. But he saw it as a firmware failure of some kind, even though the thing was no longer under warranty by years. Fixed it for free and sent it back. He's a good dude. All right. I'm not really able to moderate questions here, folks, but are there any other questions? And if so, I can take them, and if not, thank you.
Great presentation, Brent.
How far off was I, Murray?
You're right, spot on, man.
Man, that means more to me than anything else.
No, you brought it down to earth.
That's where I operate best, is way down low, man.
Yeah, no, it's good. Thanks, Brent.
Thank you. By the way, just while I'm here, I was at the Halifax flea market 2 weeks ago, or a week and a bit ago, and I bought this. This is a Bionics Tiny Track, a GPS puck antenna there somewhere, an automatic 12-volt shutoff if the rig is on and you forgot to turn it off before you left your vehicle, and an ancient General Electric VHF 16-channel radio. I got the whole kit and caboodle that just plugs in with a cigarette lighter for $60. I haven't used it yet, but in fact, I'm waiting for a programming cable from Bionics so I can program it with my own call sign. So, yeah. Thanks, Murray.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for that, Brent. It's greatly appreciated. I do have APRS myself, and I did receive one message from someone, so that was it. So I hope to do more with it in the future, but yeah, it's greatly appreciated. the whole messaging and digipeating thing's kind of confusing how it subtracts things and whatnot. So great job. All right.